As expected, we've got confirmation the Pac-12 is going to expand to 8 teams.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more, getting you ready for the season. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll talk about Michigan and their playoff situation. Something curious has happened there that we have to discuss. And then Florida, Miami. Is Florida actually going to win that game? I mean, they could. They could, all coming up on today's show. But Oregon State Athletic Director Scott Barnes has said very clearly recently, speaking with John Canzano, that the Pac-12 is going to expand. And I have talked many a times before on this very show about why they should do that and why that is in their best interests, because going to the Mountain West is not in their best interests. A reverse merger would be better, but I don't think it's the best option. Well, he caught my eye and ear, I guess you would say, when he said that he feels like 8 teams is the right number because it keeps them nimble or flexible. 8 teams is the bare minimum requirement for the NCAA to recognize you as a conference. The Pac-12 has to get to at least 8 teams to continue operating as a legal entity before the 2026 college football season. So they can play this year, Oregon State and Washington State can, with their Mountain West Scheduling Alliance. They can play next year with the Mountain West Scheduling Alliance. And then the following year, they've got to have a conference. And if they don't, they are going to forfeit a lot of money. That kind of cash pot that they have, their treasure chest or whatever you want to call it, the settlement they got from the 10 departing schools, the Pac-12 has to stay alive for them to keep that money. So that's why I've thought for a long time they're going to expand. But the 8 teams thing strikes me as curious because as both John Canzano and the Nevada Sportsnet have reported, and I think a couple other outlets have hinted at this as well, to add 6 Mountain West teams would cost about $65 million. The war chest is around $220 million. 65? You still have money left over. You can still be one of the most well-funded athletic departments in that conference. If you're trying to make the premier group of 5 conference in college football, you can't just sit at 8 teams. I'm not entirely certain what Scott Barnes is thinking here, or at least I wasn't. I thought about it some more, and I came to one of 2 conclusions. Number one, he feels that by getting to 8 teams, you then have the ability to exist as a conference but set yourself up to get to a bigger conference. Like maybe if the Big 12 went bonkers, they'd want to add 4 to 6 schools. And if there was already a direct affiliation, then adding Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and somebody else along with Oregon State and Washington State would make sense. That's if they went crazy. Or would they go with a full merger with the American with those 8 schools one day? Those are the only thoughts I can have. I do not see how being an 8-team league where you would be, that league, by the way, would be Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State. Those 5 are pretty much locks. I think Colorado State is close to a lock. So is UNLV. And we can argue from now until the end of time about the 6th. You can go with Wyoming. You can go with Air Force. You can go with San Jose State. You can go with Utah State. Whoever it would be. That conference on its own, to me, does not give you the benefit of what I have long proposed and still believe is the best path for Oregon State and Washington State, which is add the cream of the crop from the Mountain West, pay whatever the exit fees cost, use your war chest for that. And Pac-12 Commissioner Teresa Gould has said many a times, yeah, that war chest will be used for many things, among them rebuilding the conference. That's all good and fine. But you have to be bigger than that. An 8-team conference cannot be seen as the premier group of 5 league in the country, which is the whole point of this process. Because the reason you would lure Mountain West schools or American Conference schools or a combination of the two to play in your league, or Sunbelt schools, if they'd be interested, the reason you would do that is so that your conference champion has the best chance of any group of 5 conference champion of getting into the playoff. An 8-team league doesn't accomplish that. Even if you put together a league that was, even if it was a mix of American Conference teams, if you brought in Boise, Fresno, San Diego State, and then went with, say, Tulane, Memphis, South Florida, and you somehow made that work, I don't know that it would. But if you somehow found a way to make that work, even that league is going to face stiff competition from the American champion and the Sun Belt champion and maybe an undefeated Conference USA champion. I don't think that is in their best interest to sit at 8 teams. Now, here's the other angle that he might be looking at. It's a short-term play. When he's throwing out an 8-team number, he's saying 8 gives us the most flexibility. Maybe he's thinking even bigger. Maybe they have knocked, this is speculative on my part, though entirely possible. Maybe they've knocked on the door of the Big 12 and they've knocked on the door of the ACC. Certainly, I know that phone calls have been made along those lines and they just really haven't been returned with the sort of answers they were hoping for. Maybe they feel that those doors are not going to open, at least not until 2030, when the next giant round of realignment, the next imminent realignment moves are the ACC and the Pac-12. Probably somewhere in that order. But the next giant round might not be till 2030. So maybe the Big 12 is going to stand pat and they would only take ACC schools. Maybe the ACC is able to keep itself together, but they don't add anybody. And they just kind of sit with what they have and work with what they've got. And so if you get to 8 in the short term, you could exist as a league, keep the money that you got from the 10 departing schools, and go as that conference for a couple years and then try to add even more and keep building and building until you get to a 14, a 16-team league. You build yourself up to be this G5 super conference. Maybe there isn't as much appeal as I think there could be to getting a blend of Mountain West and American teams together. Maybe the Mountain West Pac-12, kind of half merger there, if 6 Mountain West teams went over to play with Oregon State and Washington State, maybe those schools collectively have to demonstrate to every other G5 program in the country, this is the place to be. Look at the level of football we're playing at here. Look at the major wins that we have notched. Maybe Colorado State upsets Colorado a time or two, and Washington State or Oregon State are able to knock off their in-state rivals, formerly of the Pac-12. So just something along those lines to make it more appealing. Those are the only things I could think of, because I saw 8 teams and that felt low. That feels incredibly low. I feel like you got to be at least in double digits. And if you want to build a league that's going to last, you can't be an 8-team conference. That's not going to happen. Now, at the very least, you'd be able to have a conference championship and have some level of access to the playoff. If you strengthen the league and you get to 12 to 14 with good programs, I think you can get it, in a 5-year span, 3 to 4 times. That would be my guess with that league that I have proposed, a mixture of American and Mountain West, and then Oregon State and Washington State. That conference champion in a 5-year span is getting to the playoff, I think at least 3 times. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB. Did you see what Vegas did with Michigan's playoff odds? I did, and we're going to talk about that next. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I hope that's obvious. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I am in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You can bet everything you want for college football. Win totals, championship odds, individual games. they can all be wagered upon. Every week 0, week 1 game can be wagered upon over at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. According to our friends at FanDuel, sponsor here at the Locked On Network, Michigan's now favored to make the playoff. Now, I am not sitting here. Some people think I don't like Michigan. And you know what? You may form whatever opinion you would like. I think whatever I think about your respective team, I hate to inform you. I regret to inform you, I'll say, that I don't have a personal agenda or animus towards your program. I just happen to believe certain things about it as it pertains to this season. Michigan being favored to make the playoff is pretty crazy. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Spencer, you don't think they're going to be any good? No, if I had to pick their record right now, I'd say 9-3. I do, however, feel like 8-4 is more likely than 10-2. Need I remind you that on their schedule, week 2 is a home game against Texas. At least they get a tune-up against Fresno State. I did that little chuckle thingamajig, call it whatever you like, because though Michigan is a massive favorite in that game and they are going to win, is it an FCS game? Not exactly. Fresno State's going to come out and they're going to make a swing. They got an experienced quarterback and they've got a veteran head coach and they're going to give you the best fight that they can. And you're going to be working through a new quarterback situation. And then Texas comes to town week 2. I haven't made many picks on this show that I feel confident about. I like Texas in that game. They also host USC. A lot of people are down on USC. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people. That's their Big Ten opener. Their Big Ten opener is USC. I will commend Michigan here because I've ripped on them correctly many a times before for canceling the home and home with UCLA and having a weak non-conference as they've gone to the playoff in the last several years. This year, they've got Texas at home. Round of applause. This is what I'm talking about. That's the sort of stuff that I'm all about in college football. So they've got Texas at home. They've got USC at home. They have to go at Washington. Look, Michigan's a sizable favorite in that game. The line has come down because I think Vegas is realizing, Washington won't suck. Michigan's better because they haven't lost as much. They've kept more of their team intact, but they still lost a lot to the NFL. They have to avoid an upset at Illinois. It's probably fine. It's called an upset for a reason, though. Michigan State at home. That's not going to be a problem. Oregon, that is also a home game. Then at Indiana, host Northwestern, and then they go at Ohio State. I look, the reason that I struggle to get behind Michigan being worthy of favorite status when it comes to making the playoff is I look at this schedule and I am seeing bare minimum 2 losses. And you could be a good team. You could be a top 15, 20 team in college football, and this schedule is 2 losses minimum. At Ohio State, that is a loss. That is a loss. Texas and Oregon at home. If Michigan goes 2-0, I'm going to have to come on here and apologize to Michigan fans and eat a lot of crow. Guess what? I don't foresee that happening in any way, shape, or form. They could win one of those games. They're at home. It's the big house. You're probably losing one. You got 2 preseason top 5 odds national championship teams. How many teams in the country can go 2-0 against 2 teams like that? Georgia, Ohio State could. I tell you, Oregon's got Ohio State on their schedule. If they also had Texas, I don't think their win total would be 10.5. I think it would be 9.5. So that's what Michigan's win total is, by the way. It's 9.5. But when I can bookmark at least 2 losses to make the playoff, Michigan then has to play perfect the rest of the way. A 3-loss Big Ten team is not getting in. I don't think a 3-loss any team is getting in, nor do I think it should, because it goes against the very fabric of college football. That is, of course, the regular season, the greatest thing in sports outside of March Madness. So when you factor in that I'm penciling in, I'm not even penciling, I'm writing in Sharpie between USC, Oregon, and Texas. I'll throw USC in there because I like them. Michigan could lose all 3 of those games. That seems unlikely because they're at home. And I've seen Sharon Moore coach on game days before. He knows what he is doing. He's got a new quarterback. He's got a mostly, not entirely, but mostly reworked offensive line, which I expect to be good, but can't possibly be as good as last year. Few questions at receiver, none at running back. Donovan Edwards is a beast. They're going to have maybe the best defensive line in the Big Ten, perhaps one of the best in all of college football, certainly one of the 5-10 best. There's a high floor, but is the ceiling anywhere close to last year? No, it is not. And yeah, you have those 3 games at home. Maybe that's why Michigan's win total is higher than I think it should be at 9.5. But do you think Michigan is going perfect in those games? I know winning at the big house is tough. I know the crowd's going to be rocking. They're going to see USC and Oregon coming in there going, hey, we got new opponents, new fan bases. This is going to be exciting, and it's going to be a rowdy environment as always off a national championship season. What's the new era going to be? There's plenty of excitement with the schedule. There are plenty of big games on this schedule. Michigan's not winning all of them. So to be favored to go to the playoff, I think there's absolute value, if you're into the gambling side of things, on betting them to miss the playoff. Because between those 3 home games, they're going to lose at least one, and they're losing to Ohio State. And here's the other thing you have to factor in. Let's say they get a win. Let's say they beat Texas week 2. They lose to USC, they beat Oregon, and they win at Ohio State. You've got 2 Big Ten losses, and you can't guarantee that puts you in the conference championship game. Is that scheduled? It probably is. It's a win against Texas, a win against Oregon. Those would be big marquee wins. But what if you've got 3 11-1 SEC teams and there was a tiebreaker and one gets left? Well, okay, so the 11-2 loser and then the champion 12-1 and then the other 11-1 or 10-2 SEC maybe that they're going to get in. The spots start to dwindle, especially when you incorporate Notre Dame into the mix. Do you know what the highest preseason win total in all of college football is? It's 10.5. You know who has it? Notre Dame. Texas has got it. Georgia's got it. Oregon's got it. Ohio State's got it. That's it. All of those teams are not going over 10.5. That's not how this game works. But all of those teams are probably winning at least 10 games. And they're going to compete. If Michigan's not winning the Big Ten this year, and I don't think they are, you're looking for one of those at-large spots. And it sounds in a 12-team playoff like, well, there's so many spots available. They're going to make it. They're going to do it. They start to dwindle really quick. 12 spots, 4 auto bids. Now we're down to 8. Big Ten SEC championship game losers, almost certainly in. Now we're down to 6. Group of 5. Now we're down to 5. What if Notre Dame gets in? If they beat Texas A&M week 1 on the road, really good chance Notre Dame is in the playoff. Suddenly we're down to 4. Michigan's not the only team that would be able to build an at-large caliber resume. So who they beat, who they lose to could absolutely matter. I just find it to be crazy with that schedule where I see 2 losses as a bare minimum. I think they're somewhere between 8-4 and 10-2. They're somewhere in that range. So for me, 2 out of their 3 most likely outcomes are not making the playoff. 10-2 probably gets you in. Probably. As long as you beat the right teams and those teams have the season that they're capable of, you probably get in. But favored to make the playoff? That seems like it's true. Does Vegas know something that I don't know? They absolutely could. They absolutely could. We're going to learn a lot about Michigan in that week 2 game against Texas. The season's so much closer than we all realize. And do you know what a big game in week 1 is? Maybe the biggest game outside of Texas A&M hosting Notre Dame? Miami, Florida. Speaking of betting lines, I don't understand what's going on over there in Gainesville either. Before we talk Florida, Miami, let's talk eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. How good of a chance does Florida have to beat Miami? That's Brandon Olsen, Locked On Gators, joining me to discuss. I noticed a line movement the other day, Brandon, because that's what I do in my free time. It went from Miami minus 3.5 week 1 in Gainesville to Miami minus 2.5. Now, I don't know if that's public money or if that's sharp money, but somebody somewhere is confident in the Gators. Why?
Well, it's me in Queens, New York. That's who it is. It's me. I put my life savings on it. I think that Florida, look, I don't think Florida's a great team. I don't think Miami's a great team. But I do think that both teams are in a kind of rough spot where they're not really proven on either side. Both are really young last year, and you're expecting more from them. But Florida's the team that has a returning starting quarterback. Florida's the team that's at home in what I think is a top 2 environment in college football right now. Like, just that stadium, the Swamp, is insane to me. I feel like there's no good line for this, so I do think that it's fair to just go home team should win in this one because it's probably just going to be ugly either way.
Well, I think that's entirely possible. You're going to have the week 1 and early season kinks getting worked out as Cam Ward works his way into a new offense with new weapons and such. I think that transition could be very good for him. He's going to have the best offensive line and running game that he has had in his college career by a landslide. It's not even close. He was on some solid Wazoo teams, but they were not able to build him an offensive line or a running game, which is why I'm really high on what Miami could be this year, because I think they have a decent shot to unlock Cam Ward's full potential this year. Of course, they have Damian Martinez to join him in the backfield. Should be a very, very strong rushing attack. But I contrast this line movement, Brandon, and it doesn't make a lot of sense in my brain because over this same time period, the last couple weeks or months, depending on the exact day when everything shifted, Florida's now down to a 4.5 win total team. Now look, everybody who follows college football knows Florida has the hardest schedule in the country. That's not even arguable. I know Brandon is fake surprised for all of you listening on podcasts right now. 4.5. This isn't a 4.5. Like, that's bordering on if you go under, you're kind of a bottom dweller in the league. Florida's not that, right?
Not at all. I don't think so. I think that the schedule just being what it is, everyone's just like, oh, they're going to lose games. Like they won 5 games last year, and their schedule is harder this year. So it makes a lot of sense. But, I don't understand the 4.5 win total. I did a full episode when that win total came out that I was like, oh, I don't know who did it, but thank you, because I took it. I promise you.
You need to get Daniel Craig's character from Knives Out on the case to figure out who done it.
Yeah, I need to. By the way, they're making a 3rd one. Actually,
I'm so excited. I would watch 27 of those movies if they kept making them.
Yep. Genuinely, you can make as many as you want. I will be there. Make it the next Fast and Furious.
Yep, I will keep watching.
But I don't really know where the 4.5 win total comes from. And I'm not one of the Florida Gators fans that's like, they're winning 9 games this year. But 4.5 is a bit low, especially when you consider you've got, 7 home games this year. You've got Samford on the schedule as 1. You've got Mississippi State as one of your very few road games. I think that's one of the things for Florida is that you don't have a lot of road games this year. The ones that you do have are pretty tough for the most part. It's Florida State, it's Texas, it's Tennessee, and then Mississippi State's the only one that's not a really difficult one there. But I think if you look at 4.5 wins, realistically, I think a lot of Florida Gators fans expect you to hit that total by the time the Georgia game comes in week 9.
I want to bring it back to this Miami and Florida game. It's the best game of week 1 outside of where game day will be, which is Texas A&M, Notre Dame at College Station. That's going to be electric. But those are really the 2 highlight, premier, impact, playoff ramification games that you've got on the slate in week 1, which is pretty typical for a college football season because scheduling, as I have repeated ad nauseum and will continue to do so, is completely broken and doesn't make any sense in college football. And if I'm ever elected commissioner, that'll be my day 1 initiative there. But I digress. It's campaign season. Brandon's on my mind. So I think in this game, you've got a quarterback advantage to Miami. I think you've got a running game advantage to Miami. Receivers with Elijah Badger in there, that's a wash, maybe even lean towards Florida. Xavier Restrepo is a football player, and he is a darn good one for the Hurricanes amongst other weapons that they've got. Defensively, I think I feel better about Miami. Head coach, look, I don't know if we fully know what Billy Napier is at the highest level. I don't feel great about Mario Cristobal in game, but I also know that he's won a decent amount of football games in his coaching career. I think that's on the back of the talent that his rosters have. And I think he has a talented roster here, and the win total expectation is such for Miami for a reason, because they have a really talented roster. Do you feel like Florida is an underdog with the better roster here?
Yeah, kind of. I do. Like I said, I think both of these teams are very young last year. Both of them had that argument last year of, well, we're not very good. Like, sure, Miami made a bowl game. But the argument is we're not very good right now. Watching these games, watching these teams, we know neither of them are awesome, but they're young. That's why we sit through it. I've said this before. I think Cam Ward very well may be a better quarterback than Graham Mertz. Been a big fan of Cam since the Incarnate Word days. Was a fan in there. I knew him back then.
He was balling at the FCS level. Balling in the South.
Rice Award winner for this top freshman at the FCS level. I'm just saying. However, he's going to be in week 1 with this team in the Swamp, which is not an easy environment to replicate or play in there. So while he very well may be the best one on the field, I don't think they've got the quarterback advantage in that game. I do think that home field advantage is very big for Florida. I mean, we've seen Florida take some teams to deep water in the Swamp where they had really no business in recent years with some of the Dan Mullen teams and Napier in his first year there. Not so much last year. But I do think that Florida's roster is undervalued right now. And for me, I think Miami's roster is – I'm more confident Miami's roster is overvalued than I am in Florida's roster being undervalued. I think that
really?
I think that when you have as many transfer portal additions as Miami had, you need a lot of stuff to go right to get them gelling and moving like the machine they need to be in week 1. I've got some hesitancy there, especially because they added a few key pieces in that second portal window, so it didn't even have spring. And like Damian Martinez is not part of that. Like Damian Martinez is a
is a running back.
And as a running back,
take the ball when it comes to you and make guys miss. It's pretty standard.
Yeah, so I'm not even harping on that one too much, but I do think that them trying to replace as much of their defensive line as they're trying to replace in week 1, expecting them to come out and play damn well, hard sell for me, man.
I think that is an interesting angle to look at this game. Something that I can't shake out of my head with Miami is that calamity for Canes fans against Georgia Tech. Brandon, do you remember what Miami's record was going into that game?
I'm assuming they were like 4-1, 5-1.
They were no. They were 4-0.
No,
they were on the doorstep of 5-0. And I think in college sports, I think this applies to professional sports too. There's something to be said about momentum and keeping it rolling. I think that took the wind out of Miami's sails. They made a bowl game last year. I don't think they came close to hitting their ceiling. They bring back some key guys. I love what they've done in the transfer portal. I can't shake. If they avoid a game like that, and certainly, this Florida game will be their first opportunity to not do that. But if they avoid that Georgia Tech loss a year ago, I'm not so sure Miami doesn't win 8 games instead of 6. And I think they feel differently for you going into this one.
Maybe, but hey, woulda, shoulda, coulda, but they didn't. And right now I'm looking at the same head coach that had that gaffe at the end of the Georgia Tech game, or the same head coach that was in charge when that gaffe happened at the end of the Georgia Tech game. And I'm looking at a team that has to come into the Swamp. And again, it's week 1. If this game was even week 4, week 3 even, I would have a different attitude towards it. But I'm looking at week 1 with a team that's trying to piece things together, and just they had question marks going into the offseason. And on paper, you addressed it. Same thing you said, same thing for Florida's offensive line. Florida's offensive line should be better this year. On paper, they addressed the needs that they had. We'll see if it actually works. But for me, I think Miami is very dependent on transfer portal players hitting. And as we've seen so often, doesn't happen. I live by the general rule of however many players you have expectations for, you probably got 10% that are going to actually hit those expectations, 10% they're going to fail miserably, and the other 80% are going to be somewhere in the middle of your expectations there.
That's a nice, clean line to end today's show on. Brandon Olsen, Locked On Gators, Week 1, Florida, Miami in the Swamp. it inches ever closer. Brandon, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Can't wait to be in the swamp.
I am a little bit jealous of that. Just a little. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.